Almost a full year after the last federal election, the Liberals have now secured a majority government.
Canadians have placed their trust in this government. We have a responsibility to live up to that, work every day to implement our policies, the right plan for the country to grow the country, and that's what we're going to do.
Opposition floor crossers brought the Liberals just one seat shy of a majority. And then, of course, this past Monday night, the Prime Minister was able to solidify it when the Liberals swept 3 by-elections across Toronto and Montreal. A majority gives the Liberals more power to easily move legislation through both the House of Commons and the committees that review that legislation. It also means, of course, the Liberals will survive confident votes, and Canadians likely won't be sent to the polls until 2029. Carney's first move after securing that majority was temporarily suspending the federal excise tax on gas, diesel, and aviation fuel. It's an attempt to relieve some stress as the war in the Middle East continues to send gas prices soaring. Earlier, I spoke to the Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister, Kody Blois, about the tax relief and the Liberal Party's new standing. Kody Blois, nice to see you.
Great to see you, Rosemary.
So you've got the majority now, and I think what everyone is wondering, what Canadians are wondering is, what will the government do now that it couldn't have done with a minority? How will that change things in terms of the agenda?
Well, look, the mission remains the same, which is for the Prime Minister to build out economic resiliency in the country, to focus on some of the domestic policy challenges around cost of living, housing, affordability. But really, in this dynamic, obviously, there's an ability to move your agenda quicker. And the House Leader, Mr. McKinnon, has been very clear to say that we want to still collaborate with parties. But in some situations, in minority parliaments, and I've had a steady diet of them since 2019, of course, there's this cat and mouse game where the opposition will come out and say, of course, we're working to support the government's agenda, and at the same time continuing to put up speakers, not wanting to advance bills. And so sometimes there's this gamesmanship around Parliament. This will allow the government, of course, particularly on critical legislation around economic reform or issues we want to move forward, in some cases to be able to make that happen much quicker. But again, the government understands in this moment that we want to be collaborative. The Prime Minister is running a government that is big tent, that is trying to bring the country together and focus on the big issues. So we will certainly use that responsibly, but this is an opportunity, particularly on legislation, to move quickly.
So one of the areas where the Conservatives would like to see collaboration is on the makeup of committees. The House Leader, as you said, has indicated that he plans to move a motion to change the makeup of those committees to reflect the majority. The Conservatives believe that the committees should reflect the outcome of the past election, not what the House looks like now. What is the Liberal position on that? Is there some flexibility there in terms of how that will work?
Well, look, I heard certainly Mr. Scheer on the program earlier talk about the idea that this was outside the box or that this would be unusual. The standing committees in the House of Commons are always a reflection of the number of seats that any political party has in a given context. And so, for example, the NDP in many cases don't have access to sit on standing committees because they're not a registered party. The Liberal Party now holds a majority of the seats of House of Commons. And of course, the principle that has been my understanding since 1867, since we got started as a confederation, of course, is that there is a mirror reflection at the committee level. Of course, members of Parliament, whether Liberal, Conservative, Bloc, anyone who sits on those committees will bring their ideas to the table. But the idea that Mr. Scheer is suggesting that this is that we shouldn't follow the parliamentary tradition that has existed since kind of time immemorial is, I don't think, holds a lot of water. So we'll be moving those standing orders, or I'll let Minister McKinnon speak to that. But of course, the long-standing practice is that the committees are a reflection of the party standing in the House, and we don't intend to change that tradition.
You were involved in bringing Chris D'Entremont across the floor. I know you talked to my colleague Catherine Cullen about that last week. Given that this is still a slim majority, is there still an appetite to seek out other floor crossers? Has anyone reached out to you and said, hey, I'm interested, how would this work?
Well, Rosemary, you can appreciate if those conversations were happening. As much as I respect your journalism, I'm not going to necessarily talk about that on national television. As I've mentioned to Catherine and as I've said to others, this has been a very organic process. Yes, it was a conversation I got started with Mr. D'Entremont, but you saw Evan Solomon standing with the Prime Minister and Marilyn Gladue. Talib Noor Mohammed, I think, was involved with Matt Genereux and Tim Hodgson with Michael Ma, amongst others. So there's a lot of different relationships that Liberal members of Parliament have. This has been organic, and I think it's a reflection. I think it's important for us to talk about, Rosemary, that this is a reflection of the way in which the Prime Minister is governing. Even in my own riding in King's Hants, I'll have individuals that have been either longtime Liberals or individuals who have not been Liberal members, whether it's on the Conservative or NDP side, who are saying, I appreciate the way in which the Prime Minister is governing. He's trying to bring the country together. The tone and tenor, and I'll give you a proof point. At our convention in Montreal last week, the Prime Minister didn't talk about any other parties. He talked about what he wants to accomplish as leader of the Liberal Party and as the government, and I think that's the type of refreshing tone that Canadians want to see, and of course it's being reflected. So the message is, of course, if there's other individuals who are seeing the Liberal Party as a vehicle to represent not only their own interests as members of Parliament, where ideologically they fit, but also what they believe is perhaps the best interest of the country, of course we're open to those conversations, but it's not as though there's a big organic or a big push from the PMO. This has happened organically, and if more happens, it'll happen organically as it has to this date.
Just to go back to the majority piece, so yes, this will speed up the ability to put the government's agenda in place. I would also argue that it increases the expectations. The government doesn't have any excuses now as to why things can't get done. Is there a recognition of that delivery now becomes the most important piece?
One of the things I've been most impressed with the Prime Minister is his constant focus on being able to move quickly. I've described it as impatient in the best kind of way. He comes from a private sector background. He knows it's a big moment for the country, and I think his words after the by-elections, Rosemary, were, it's time to get serious. And so the government from day one has been trying to move an aggressive agenda to be able to build major projects in the country, to build up economic resilience, Canada's role in the world. I think we're seeing that on the Prime Minister's leadership on the global stage, while also trying to tackle some of the affordability challenges. We can talk about the government's announcement this week to remove the federal excise on gasoline for the next 4 months. But yes, of course, anytime you're in government, there's an expectation that you're delivering for Canadians. That's kind of, quote unquote, the burden that you hold when you win elections, but that's the privilege, and it's the ability to choose and to try to drive the decisions forward. It's not always easy. The Prime Minister knows the expectations that is on him, and this gives us an opportunity to deliver for Canadians.
I'll just end on the fuel tax because it goes into effect on Monday all the way up to Labor Day. There were some people that were calling for this before. I'm wondering why we landed where we did and whether the government waited too long, perhaps, to offer some relief to Canadians.
Rosemary, no one has a crystal ball about what the next number of days, let alone weeks or months, is going to look like with the situation. And Canadians understand that the reason why we're facing higher costs at the pump is because of what we're seeing in the Middle East and the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. I was, as a member of Parliament, I was pleased to see that Iran is signaling that all boats will be able to move through. But we don't know what the next couple of days might look like. It's been an up and down situation. We believe it's a responsible choice in terms of a 4-month relief on the federal excise. We also have additional affordability programs, whether that be childcare, the National Food School Program, programs that we've put in place, the groceries and essential rebates. Affordability, of course, that's one lens through the price of gas at the pump, but we also think that there's other programs that matter to Canadians. We're going to continue to protect and enhance those. And at the end of the day, we'll take this day by day because we're living in a very uncertain world. We thought this was a responsible choice in the interim.
Okay. Kody Blois, nice to see you. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Rosemary.
Conservatives are pushing back against the Liberal majority's newfound powers, specifically when it comes to the standing committees that review government legislation. Committee makeups are negotiated between parties after an election to reflect party standings. But now the Liberals dominate the House of Commons. They're looking to take control of committees.
I say this as someone who's testified to committees in front of the Canadian Parliament, in front of the UK Parliament for decades. There's a difference between real testimony, real substance, getting to issues, debating aspects of law, advancing. That's the job of parliamentarians, and showboating. We're going to have less of that. We're going to have more substance. I think all parliamentarians, in the end, will appreciate that, even if it's a change for some of them.
The Liberal government can make this change after successfully sweeping those 3 by-elections this past Monday. With 174 MPs, they now hold the majority inside the House of Commons. Earlier, I spoke to Conservative House Leader Andrew Scheer about what a Liberal majority means for the official opposition. Andrew Scheer, nice to see you.
Great to chat with you.
So I'm just trying to get a sense of how or if the Conservative strategy is going to change a little bit now because of this majority government. How do you think the approach changes when it comes to holding the government to account? Obviously, there's some things you can do and some things you're going to be a little bit limited in.
Well, we're going to stay focused on efforts to make life more affordable for Canadians. You saw that this week with our motion to repeal the federal taxes on gas and diesel. We believe that the government should lift those taxes for the entire year. The Liberals came up with a third of the relief for a third of the year. So we're still going to use our time in the House, our opposition days, our speaking slots to push for things to make life more affordable, cutting Liberal taxes, cutting red tape so that we can get more investment in Canada, get people working after a decade of Liberal policies chasing that investment away. Now, what we're hoping is that the government doesn't waste precious House time trying to give themselves a majority on committees, because a lot of the important work that the opposition does to hold the government to account, to shine a light on corruption and waste, is at the committee level. And the government has signaled this week that they're going to try to stack the deck on committees, and we're calling on them to abandon those plans. Stay focused. Let's all stay focused on making life more affordable for Canadians.
I understand entirely why that would be a concern for you, but if the roles were reversed, I'm sure that you would also seek a majority on the committee, because it does make the government's life easier. It doesn't make your life easier, but it does make the government's life easier to have a majority on those committees.
Well, Mark Carney shouldn't be focused on making life more easy for himself. He should be focused on making life more affordable for Canadians. And this is unprecedented. It's important for Canadians to understand that never before has a government changed the very nature of the government that they were elected at the ballot box. The Canadian people elected a minority government. That means that they elected a strong opposition to provide a check on this Liberal government after 11 years of policies that have driven up prices and driven away investment. A big part of that is at the committee level. Committees have the power to force government officials to produce documents. We have the power to subpoena information, to compel testimony from witnesses. Yeah. That's how we uncovered a lot of waste and mismanagement and, quite frankly, corruption in the last Parliament. And to suggest that this is a normal standard practice. No, the committees are made up, the numbers on the committee are made up based on the results of the last election.
Well, I heard you say that this week, but are they not, in fact, based on the makeup of the House of Commons?
Well, in every Parliament, after the election, the parties come together and on a consensus basis to reflect the will of the Canadian people expressed at the ballot box, we determine how many seats MPs, various parties get on committee. When the Canadian people have voted for a minority, then the government gets a minority on committees. And that's what Canadians expressed at the last election, the last time every Canadian had a chance to weigh in on which party should govern. They chose to send the strongest opposition in Canadian history. They chose to give Mark Carney a limited mandate with a minority parliament, and we are calling on Mark Carney to resist the temptation to be just another Liberal. You know, he's proven to be just another Liberal in so many ways. We don't think he should be focused on making life easier for himself. We don't think he should be using his powers to block investigations and limit the powers of the opposition. We believe we should all be focused on making life more affordable for Canadians.
I mean, listen, the job of the official opposition is really important, and I would agree with you, perhaps the most important inside committees. But the Prime Minister this past week said that he thought that work wasn't getting done in committees, that there was filibustering, I think showboating was the word that he used, that in fact he wants everyone to work. Is there a way for a committee to collaborate, even with a Liberal majority in the committees?
Well, first of all, I should point out that Liberals have filibustered their own legislation. They prevented the Justice Committee from dealing with efforts to make changes to Canada's bail system. Just this week, they were filibustering the Ethics Committee to prevent an investigation into a potential conflict of interest between the Finance Minister and his spouse, who works at a Crown Corporation, or his partner who works at a Crown Corporation. Yeah. Where there is common ground, we have demonstrated that we will be responsible and that we will accept the will of the Canadian people. We have allowed legislation to pass where we believe at the very least it won't do any further harm. The government got several pieces of legislation. We actually helped improve legislation. Bill C-2 was a sweeping overreach where government was going to give itself all kinds of new powers in the name of public safety. We said, hold on a second, let's hive off the parts that we can agree with, that we believe Canadians would support, and let's put brakes and limits on that government overreach. And that was very successful. So I think Mark Carney is creating the illusion of a problem. In reality, where they seek to find common ground with the opposition, legislation has passed relatively quickly. Where they try to block efforts to undo bad Liberal policies, or when they try to shut down investigations into corruption, well then yes, committees have been bogged down. But I would point out that is always a result of Liberal choices. They control the timeline, they control the agenda on these committees, even with a minority.
I understand that you don't want this change to happen, but it does, and I say this with respect, it does sound a little bit like you're in denial that the majority has happened. And I understand you don't like the way it's happened, but this is where we are right now. It's a slim majority, so we'll see how long it lasts. But so what others, I mean, you were Speaker of the House of Commons. There are other things that you can do to make sure you are able to have a check and balance on the government, are there not?
Well, first of all, I would say no one's in denial. If anyone's in denial, it's the government that is refusing to accept the results of the last general election. We understand that now there is a majority of Liberals in the House of Commons, and that means that they will already have a whole bunch of new power that comes with that. What we're saying is that let's preserve that long-standing principle, that precedent that goes back generations, where the committee makeup, in order to protect the tools the opposition has to hold the government to account, let's make sure that that reflects the will of the Canadian people at the last general election. And I would suggest that for Mark Carney to use precious House time, at a time when he's delivered Canadians the worst food inflation in the G7, the only shrinking economy in the G7, we still haven't got a major project through his new major projects office, still no pipeline to the Pacific Coast. Let's not waste precious House time giving the government more power or making it easier for Liberal politicians. Let's stay focused on making life more affordable and making Canada stronger and more independent in the face of global threats. That's what we're calling on the government to do.
I'm going to end on this. Yes, this is, the way Mark Carney got this majority. It could also be viewed as a comment on your leader. I just wonder what caucus was like. I know you can't tell me what happened in caucus, but this was the first caucus meeting since the majority. And I wonder whether there is an understanding inside the team that everyone needs to stay, that no one else should go. And if you, for instance, as an influential member of the team, are reaching out to your colleagues to make sure that everyone is satisfied with where things stand in the Conservative Party right now.
Well, it's part of a leader's role, and something that Pierre has done ever since he took the helm of our party, to constantly check in with MPs. Partially to get feedback, partially to hear what's going on in their own ridings, to get advice, to get input. So that work continues. We have a great relationship with caucus. And what I heard this week, and you're right, I can't go into specific detail, but I heard from a great group of people who looked voters in the eye in the last election and said, elect us and we will fight to lower Liberal taxes, to undo a decade's worth of bad policies that have driven up home prices, made it so that young Canadians can't start their lives. Elect us and we will go to work for you. And everyone in that caucus room is aware of that solemn bond that they created with their voters in the last election. They were elected as Conservatives to fight for those conservative principles, and I know myself and the rest of the team, we take that bond with our voters extraordinarily seriously, and we're going to stay focused on what they elected us to do.
Okay, Conservative House Leader Andrew Scheer, thanks for making the time.
Thank you very much.